Good morning. My name is Juan Echanove. I'm the Senior Director for Food and Water Systems at CARE, and today I will briefly talk to you about the upcoming food security crisis that the COVID pandemic is causing in the developing countries. I'm sure that many of you have probably read in the news the warnings by United Nations and many others talking about the world on the brink of a hunger pandemic, as they call it, as a result of COVID crisis. And there is indeed increased evidence, as we shall be, of rising food insecurity in many parts of the world. So probably it's worth to take a close look into the root causes of this potential hunger pandemic, because there are multiple. What you see here is a basic scheme of a food system, including, the resources that the farmer needs to produce, seeds, fertilizers, etc. Next the farmers themselves, then the markets that the farmers have to reach, and then the consumers acquiring the food, right? And the main components of food security are also indicated here in these boxes with arrows. The availability of food, which relates to the supply side, meaning that is there enough food available out there produced by the farmers? Also the access to the food, including affordability. It's the food actually affordable? Can people pay for it? And finally, the aspect of nutrition, the quality of the food. So let's keep this structure in mind as we speak. All these started as a pandemic in China. Then the epicenter moved to Europe, and from there it moved to the US. The governments in the global north responded to this health crisis with social distance measures, including movement restrictions and lockdowns to slow the spread of the pandemic. And this very soon triggered a huge economic crisis in the global north, the worst since 1929, according to the International Monetary Fund. And amongst many other impacts, this economic crisis is also reducing the demand of commodities like copper, like cotton, like cocoa, etc., that countries in the global north are buying from developing countries, and is also reducing the remittances that the migrants from the Africa, Asia, Latin America living in the US, in Europe, are sending back home. It's also reducing the investment by America, by Japan, by Europe in the global south, and it's killing tourism. So in short, the crisis in the north is causing an economic crisis in the global south as well. And this crisis means that consumers and farmers are affected in their income because they are losing their jobs, they have less funding available, so they cannot afford buying food, consumers, and farmers often cannot afford now buying the seeds, fertilizers, etc. that they need to produce. But this is just one side of the story. Actually, the problem is deeper, because countries in the global south are now imposing also strict distance measures too, sometimes a kind of mirroring the model from the global north with very strict movement restrictions, sometimes even stricter to the way this has been applied in Europe or in the US. And this is increasing further the disruption of the food systems in various ways, as you can see here. So for instance, there are trade restrictions that make it even more difficult for farmers to buy seeds, fertilizers, and so on. And in many countries, farmers are also confined, so they cannot go to the fields to farm the land, they cannot produce food. Many markets are closed, and consumers cannot go to the markets to buy the foods. But even if markets are open, even if supermarkets, groceries are still working, and people is allowed to go there to buy the food, the problem is that many people, many poor in the countries in the global south, in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia, they rely on their daily wages. They are part of the informal economy. So unless they are able to go out there to work, they will not earn money. So they cannot buy food. And all these things are happening now already, even before the crisis, the health crisis. I mean, the pandemic as such has not yet started to affect the global south that badly. But in Latin America, particularly in Ecuador, in Brazil, in Mexico, the pandemic is now getting grounds. And probably very soon in Africa, in Southeast Asia, in Asia, the pandemic may expand further. We don't know how intense it will be and if it will be as bad as in Europe or US or China. But if that happens, that will add further shock to the food system in the global south and can even provoke social unrest, which is a further cause of food insecurity. We also have to keep in mind that all these pressures are particularly difficult for women because they often eat least and last. And they are also at further risk of gender-based violence because of the lockdowns. This crisis will affect women's access to water, to land, to sanitation. So in short, it's gonna deep further gender injustice. We already have extremely worrying data from many of the countries in the developing world. We know, for instance, that 90%, 9 of every 10 women refugees in Jordan say that food is right now their greatest need. And 80% they are saying that they are having trouble getting vegetables. An analysis by the government of Bangladesh conducted very recently found that 3/4 of the respondents don't have sufficient access to food at home. And 2/3 reported that the main problem, the main challenge is that markets are already closing. And we see the same in Niger and in many other places. A couple of weeks ago, I conducted a meeting with more than 40 food security, nutrition, agricultural experts working for CARE in different countries of the world. And they were sharing what they see in the countries where they are working. And it's very worrying. You can see here some of the things that they say about Uganda, about Cote d'Ivoire, and virtually all the different places where we work in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia. So thank you so much for your attention. I will do further presentations to describe what is CARE response to this crisis. But let me finish with a quote from Amartya Sen, who is an Indian economist, who was an Indian economist, very much focused on the economic causes and social causes of famines in India, and that I really admire very much. Amartya wrote, "I believe that virtually all the problems in the world come from inequality of one kind or another." Thank you so much for your attention today.